Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome our today's expert, Vivek Joshi sir, who has been working as an assistant professor at Rashtriya Raksha University, Gandhinagar. He is having 8+ years of experience at various universities. He holds a keen interest in the field of cybersecurity, network security, and social engineering, and have done extensive research in this domain. Okay, so over to you, sir. You may take over the session. Sir, I guess you are muted.
Oh, sorry. Am I audible now, ma'am?
Yes, yes, you are
Yeah,
audible.
yeah. Sorry. So once again, thank you, Sivanki ma'am, and good afternoon to all of you. So let me just chart out the lecture that I'm going to deliver. So I'm going to start with some context. So I'll giving you some context in which we are going to learn few things today, and I'm going to give you some theoretical aspect of it, and then we are going to learn some practical aspect of it. Okay, so let me directly just start with the theoretical aspect. I'll give you the context in which we are going to study the theory, and then I'll explain via practicals. So just give me 5 minutes. Okay, so I hope my screen is visible to all of you.
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Okay, so let me start. So the idea is to understand network security and to understand few tools regarding network security, and we'll be focusing on special aspect of network security today because the tools that I'm going to explain today will be dealing with the pen testing. So that's why the title is network security and pen testing. Okay, so let me start with the basic definition, but I'm going to explain the security in the broader context also. So let me start with the very basic stuff. That is, network security is the process of taking preventive measures to protect the underlying networking infrastructure. Okay, let me pause it right here. It is a process of taking preventive. Okay, so the word preventive means we are preventing against something, correct? So the idea of security here, network security, is dealing with the attacks and preventing against the attacks, and that part of security is known as defensive security. Okay, so the network security basically that we are going to study will cover defensive, but there is also offensive side of it. Because if I again, let me just repeat the definition again, the first part of definition rather, that is, network security is the process of taking preventive measures to protect the underlying network infrastructure. So I'm taking certain measures against something. So what is that against something? It is against attacks, probably in the terms of denial of service attack, probably in terms of uh, gaining access to my network through illegal means, gaining access to some part of my network, full network, or time-based access to my network. Because what happens in certain cases, so let me give you an example. So obviously we all have heard that the attackers take the control of entire network, but attackers are nowadays very smart. Okay, if you observe the patterns of attacks for last 5 years, basically what happens nowadays, attackers are not only taking precautions to not get caught, but they will make sure that they will not get caught, but they will blame it on others, right? So the idea is using a network, a dummy network or proxy network, and originate an attack or pretend to originate an attack from that proxy network or a dummy network, so that whenever you retrace the attack, you will reach to a network, or you will reach to a node, or you will reach to a computer, but unfortunately that computer is already been compromised. Okay, so how to identify whether actually an attack took place from that particular network or from that particular PC? And that's where the network security or the aspect of security meets aspect of digital forensics. Okay, so although digital forensics not part of the talk today, but just to give you guys a context, because basically the idea of today's lecture is to not only give you basic definition, but to give you guys a context under which everything works. Okay, so let's say attack starts from a particular PC. So how do you establish that attack has started from a particular network or through a particular PC or a laptop or a device or a set of devices or a set of servers? Correct? You have to forensically analyze them. Digital forensic analysis. So the idea is to not only integrate network security through the means of attacks and defense, but to also understand the forensics aspect of it. Okay, so now let me cover the other part of the definition. So network security is the process of taking preventive measures to protect the underlying networking infrastructure from unauthorized access, misuse, malfunction, modification, destruction, or improper disclosure. Okay. Now, obviously, this is a very bookish definition. I don't expect any one of you to remember this, but this definition helps me give you guys a context. Okay. Hello. Hello. I think somebody's mic is on. Okay. Okay. So, okay, getting back to the topic. So, network infrastructure from unauthorized access, misuse, malfunction. Now, misuse by definition means use of a network that is not intended. Okay, unauthorized access, we all know. Malfunction, what it's supposed to happen, what is supposed to function, but rather not functioning in that manner, that is malfunction. Modifying, destruction means complete overall of the network. You will not be allowed to access any part of the network. So complete bifurcation of network. By the way, nowadays you guys observing that DDoS attack or denial of service attacks has been increasing, especially if you guys observing Russia Ukraine war. So there is increasing amount of modification or destruction, especially this aspect of security is happening right now. So a lot of hackers have united, the Western hackers, so to say, and the Western hackers, because of their ideological difference with the Russian country, because Russia has invaded Ukraine. So there has been continuously increasing DDoS attack happening from Western countries on Russian website. Okay, so this is the context in which we are going to learn. Okay, so the idea is there is a defensive part, there is offensive part, and to defend better we need to understand how to do more offensive better, or to understand the mind of offender, right? So if I am a criminal, how do I operate? If I understand that, then I will be able to defend my system. And the cyber security or the network security is the continuous chess between defender and the offender. Okay, it is not static, it is continuously dynamic. Okay, if you want to be a good defender, you have to understand the mind, or at least you understand the tricks of offender. Okay, so that's the constant game. So today I'm going to demonstrate from the point of view of offender, by the way. Okay, so few attacks that I want to mention here before starting for the with example. uh, Active attack. Okay, so I'm not going to go into the individual attacks because it will take me at least 3 to 4 hours to go through a major attacks, not only counting the individual attacks, otherwise it will take me days, right? So the broad category of attacks that I'm going to explain today: active attack. Active attack is a network exploit, and I want you guys to focus on the word exploit because it is going to be key in the next part of our lecture. So please make sure that you understand this word, or at least keep this word in your mind. I'll explain later on, even though it is not clear from this definition. So an active attack is a network exploit in which attacker attempts to make changes to the data on the target or data en route to the target. So the idea is there is a source and there is a destination. Okay. So between source and destination, there exists our network. Either it is wired, either it is wireless, either it is Bluetooth, either it is infrared. There is some form of channel, physical or wireless channel, that is existing between source and destination. And to perform active attack is to not only get insight to that active channel, but also access the data packet which is transferring from your source to destination. So please understand, this is a two-level attack. Active attack is a two-level attack. You are not only gaining access to the channel, but you are also gaining access to the data packet which is existing inside that network. Okay, so it's a two-level attack. So active attacks are bit complex. They are much more advanced than the passive attacks that we are going to learn later on. Okay, so the active attacks has two-level complexity, and active attacks are much more difficult to implement. Although nowadays there are various tools and means to perform active attacks, or at least try to simulate active attacks. Okay, so there is a better context in understanding active attacks today than, let's say, 5 years ago. Okay, so the idea is to make change in the data packet. Okay, so make change into the data which is transferring between source and destination. Okay, and that is the core part of active attack, to not only attack the channel but to attack the message, sometimes either steal something from the data packet or sometimes modify the data packet according to the need of the attacker, and that modified data packet then will represent as the original data packet, and then it will be represent to the destination. So that is an active attack. An active attack, although it is not mentioned here, will involve offensive capability, will involve offensive tools, will involve offensive mindset, right? So please keep that in mind. And the word exploit, as I told you, please underline it right now. Okay, and the next part of network attack is passive attack. Passive attack is a network attack in which a system is monitored and sometimes scanned. Okay, monitored and scanned for open ports, vulnerable weak points, but does not affect the message or data message or the data packet which goes through between source and destination. Okay, so the fundamental difference, I would say, between active and passive is that passive attack doesn't intend to modify the actual message. So in a way, the complexity level of passive attack, I would say, is lesser than active attack. Why? Because it is not a two-level attack that you first have to gain access to the channel and then again you have to gain access to the data packet. Here you just are observing channel. So if you have access to the channel, the passive attack
channel. So if you have
can be
access to the
performed.
channel,
Okay,
the passive
so the
attack,
idea is to perform the attack by gaining access to the channel. Okay, now what are some of the benefits of doing passive analysis? Because it is quite clear what benefit that an attacker will have in active attack, right? But in passive attack, what kind of information that attacker gains when it attacks a particular system or a particular destination point, right? In offensive, you modify the message because you want to make sure that certain kind of message is received in destination or certain kind of message does not get received in the destination. But in passive attack, you don't want to change anything. You just want to observe, and based upon your observation, later on, you can use this data for your active attack. So the idea is passive attack is not as complex, but it does reveal certain information. So if I, let's say if I analyzing in a network, and if I say, if I want to analyze a network using passive means, I will use the tools like network mapper and mapper, that is, or wireshark. Okay, so these two are netcat. So there are various tools, but network mapper and wireshark, I would say, are primary, one of the best tools out there, open source tools, which we will use. So if you have used Wireshark, you know what kind of information you might receive, right? The size of data packet, the source IP, the destination IP, right? So you're analyzing data packet, you're analyzing the network mode, but you're not able to access the actual content of the data packet, right? So the passive attacks will provide you the information which you can later utilize to attack a system. Okay. Now, is it beneficial to use passive attack? Because in a way, if you are eventually going to do active attack, why to go for passive attack rather than just directly go for active attack? And the point here is active attack has a large risk attached to it. Okay, what you're doing is basically exposing, not only when you are attacking a system, you're not only attacking a system, but you are also exposing yourself to that system. And there is a very large chance that you will be detected or your presence would be detected. So it becomes high risk complex attack. Active attacks are high risk attacks by nature. Any active attack that you will see has a very high risk attached to it. As compared to passive attack, the risk factor is relatively low. Okay, so the risk factor becomes important aspect. Another aspect is sometimes you don't want to do passive attack. Sorry, you don't want to do active attack because you are good with the information that you have. You don't want the complete information regarding the data packets or regarding the source and destination. You just want to know the information about the network, the type of network and all that. So for that, passive attack is good enough. Okay, so few key aspects of security before I start the practical aspect. And I think this will provide you some idea that what we are trying to do in security. So we have learned about two types of attack that generally happens on network, active and passive. And through those attacks, what kind of mechanism or what kind of exploits that we are trying to use or methods we are trying to use to gain access over a network. Okay. And the first thing is access control. Okay. Access control is to have control over your network, and controlling the access basically means controlling the 80% of security of your network, right? Because network security is basically the game of access. If you have access to the network, basically you can perform anything on network. So if you want to define network security by other means, just define it in the terms of access control, and 80% of the attacks can be identified through access control point. Okay. Another important aspect that nowadays becomes very important because of mobile applications, application security. Okay. And application security doesn't actually only include software, but it includes operating system under which it is executed. It includes hardware on which it is running, right? So a lot of vulnerable points that you will identify for application security. So application security and the way it is designed way it is coded also becomes important part of its security. So access control, second point is application security becomes very important point here. Third point are time tested softwares called firewalls. Now these buggers firewalls are found in especially two types, hardware and software, right? And generally we have all encountered firewalls if you are using computers, because in a way computers are still defended mostly by firewalls, right? If you have firewall down, uh, you might have faced a lot of attacks, or you might have not even realized that what kind of attacks might have happened on your computer system, right? So firewalls and managing firewalls, okay, is a key important aspect, and firewalls basically helps you create rules, regulations, and safety parameters that you can define for your computer. Although I'll not go into the detail of firewall right now because it will take me another lecture or so, but just to give you guys an idea, what firewall does is it defines rules, it defines measures, it defines methods through which one can have access. Again, the point of access becomes very important when we are talking about firewall. Okay, so firewall can be found in two types, software and hardware. Although if you have capacity, large capacity, large company, or requirement which suits hardware firewall, then you can opt for it. Otherwise, if you are using single system or multi-system setup, which has PC less than 10 or 20 setup or 20 PC or 20 nodes, then I think software firewall would work perfectly fine for you guys if you know how to analyze and uh, update the firewall regularly. There is another point I would like to attach with firewalls, and those are intrusion detection system, IDS. Okay, so IDS slash firewalls, this two will work pretty fine. Next point that has become important nowadays is behavioral analytics, and that's where the aspect of AI, machine learning, comes into the picture. In last 10 to 15 years, the point of behavioral analytics has become very, very important. Okay, and in security, especially network security, there are particularly very peculiar patterns in each kind of attacks. Okay, and if that attack has already taken place in the past, based upon its behavior, based upon its signature, based upon the way it was implemented, based upon the kind of tools it has utilized to perform that attack, and that particular attack, then it is stored and it is then given to researchers throughout the world who are working in cybersecurity. So that particular attack becomes a part of larger behavioral analytics database. So whenever those kind of attacks happen, you can know which person originated it, or at least which group originated it. Sometimes what happens that you can copy a particular attack, but it becomes very difficult because every what happens that if you understand the criminal psychology, if you perform a particular kind of attack, you want to make it that attack as your own signature attack, correct? So every hacker group, ransomware group, if you read about those kind of groups, you will realize that each group has its own signature behavioral pattern. For example, uh, there are some ransomware attacks which happens on Windows system. There is a particular Russian ransomware group called Conti, CONTI, and it has become very infamous nowadays because Conti has declared war on Western hackers, although that's a different story. But why I'm telling you about Conti in behavioral analytics, because Conti is a ransomware group which particularly is well known for exploiting Windows service point. Okay, and I'll show you what are services and how to exploit it using Metasploit. But just to give you guys an idea that each individual hacker group, ransomware groups, has their own signatures, and by analyzing those signatures, those patterns, you can actually predict, and you can actually analyze and know when this kind of attack will happen, or at least to identify if this similar kind of attacks happen somewhere, then at least you know which group originated it. Okay. The talk about wireless security, that is our next point, is become very important nowadays because of mobile phones. Okay, Wi-Fi networks, mobile phones, and there is increasing aspect of IoT devices, and IoT devices are particularly vulnerable to attack called as SDR attacks or software defined radio attacks. Okay, so anyone is interested can look up the word SDR, and they will know. But the point here is that wireless security has become prominent in last 10 years because of mobile and because of IoT, right? So to give you guys an idea about wireless security and why it is important, uh, just a few years ago, there was a very famous hacker group coming from Israel, and they had demonstrated that they could literally open every known existing company's car's lock using a particular device, right? So the idea is, you have nowadays, all of you have a wireless locking system attached to your car, right? So you have a wireless button attached to your key, and you press a button and the entire car gets locked, and by pressing another key or the same key twice, you can unlock your car. Okay, so whenever you're doing this, there is a communication happening between the key to the car through some kind of frequency channel. Okay, and the SDR, or the software defined radio frequencies, because those are generally radio frequencies. Okay, other devices, so there are certain SDR devices which will capture those frequencies and will modify it, or at least will replicate it. So if you perform the same application twice in front of an SDR device, what it will do, it will copy that particular part of frequency. And if you want to unlock your car, what I'll do, I'll just repeat that frequency again, okay, but through my device, and I'll be able to hack your car, or at least get access to your car, right? So wireless security, particularly with the reference of IoT devices, has become very important aspect, and it has a very large scale need for security researchers. So if anybody is interested, please, you can look it up, wireless security. Intrusion detection system we have discussed, but the aspect of intrusion detection also has another aspect called intrusion prevention system. Okay, so the idea is, once you detect something, obviously you want to do what? You want to prevent it, right? So how do you prevent a system, okay, that preventive measures or the combinations of preventive measures becomes the part of intrusion prevention system. So what it will basically do, because in order to prevent something, at least you should know what you are affected by. For example, if I know that why I'm having a bad uh, case of migraine, probably it is related to my bad sleeping pattern. Probably it is because no, I'm not eating right kind of food, or probably it is I'm not at all focusing on exercise that I needs to be doing. Okay, so if you identify the areas in which you have a problem, and then what you do, you identify and you try to remove it. So IDS, that is intrusion detection, becomes the first layer of security. Then once you detect it, IPS is the next layer of security. Before it reaches to the system, IPS system will be the layer that it will defend the system, okay, by basically blocking data packets, blocking the access to the network, blocking to access to particular IP, or even range of IPs for that matter, right? For example, if there is a DDoS attack happening on your computer, so IPS, nowadays there are latest IPS systems which will actually identify range of IPs and will directly block your range of IPs, and you can actually save your system from DDoS attack. Although, as I told you, that this is a never-ending chess game. If you perform or maneuver this kind of security measure, obviously there are loopholes in it, and you can exploit it, right? So it's a never-ending game. And finally, before starting our practical session, I want you guys to understand a few important tools: packet sniffers, web scanners. So I think all of you guys are familiar with scanners, as I told you, Wireshark or a network mapper, uh, intrusion detection system. And you don't need to know, but there is a very famous open source intrusion detection system. If you want to check it out, called Snort, SNORT, Snort. So Snort is an open source IDS system, and you can download it and you can configure it on your system. There are a lot of resources available for you to do it. And finally, penetration testing. So we'll be focusing on the last part today, that is penetration testing. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start my demonstration of Metasploit. Okay. So basically explain things as I will start my exploitation or using my Metasploit tool to show you how to do pen testing. Okay. So there are few things you need to understand before I start Metasploit, and that is vulnerability, that is weak points. Weak points means every operating system, either it is Linux, Kali, Ubuntu, Unix, Windows 11, Windows 10, Android, Macintosh. Okay. Take any operating system or any application software, or rather any software, right? Regardless of it is an application software or a system software, each software has some vulnerable or weak points through which you can gain access to that system. Sometimes it is not intentional, but sometimes those weak points are left there intentionally. Okay. And that's where the problem lies. So you need to make sure that whatever the tools or softwares that you're using, you have to be very sure that those kind of softwares doesn't have weak points, and if they have weak points, at least they are not deliberate. Okay. But because if you left deliberate weak points, then it becomes very difficult for you to save yourself from external threats. So weak points are first thing that you need to understand, because if you understand weak points, what you are going to do, you will going to use those weak points against that system and get inside that system, right? So it becomes very, very important to identify the weak points of those systems. And we can identify weak points of any network or any system through Metasploit that I'll demonstrate. Then we have exploits. Okay, once you identify the weak point, what you are going to do, you are going to make sure that you are going to attack that system with precision, with efficiency. Okay. So how do I attack a system or a weak point rather with precision and accuracy? Because see, each weak point has its own property as well. Okay. If there is a weak point in memory, then an attack on memory would be different. Okay. If there is a weak point in service, then attack on service would be different. Okay. So if there are different weak points, attacks on the system also changes. So exploits are nothing but the way of attacking a system. Because there are different weak points, there will be different exploits. Okay. And finally, payload. In order to gain access, okay, again I'm using the word access, right? So you have to understand how access is important in network security. So in order to gain access, what you have to do finally is to create a pack of code, okay, and deliver that pack of code, which has obviously harmful code, which will attack the system and will help you gain the access control, or will help you gain the entire system takeover. Okay. So vulnerable points, weak points, attack on system, and code. These three phases will become part of entire attack, and through which you can actually gain access to any other system. And all these three steps can be done using tool called Metasploit. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is share my virtual machine with you guys, and we'll start demonstrating how to utilize Metasploit. So just give me a few minutes, guys, to set up my VM station. Is my screen visible to all of you guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay, okay,
Yes, sir.
okay, okay. So okay.
Yes, sir.
So let's start with the practical way. So Metasploit. Okay. But as I told you, first I need to identify weak points. So how to identify weak points? Again, as I told you that during the time of explanation of active and passive attack, I was telling you, I told you that passive attack is performed because through passive attack you can identify weak points that you can later utilize to perform active attack. Okay. So I'll demonstrate uh, a tool which I think all of you might be familiar with, called Network Mapper. So Nmap is very famous tool. So through Network Mapper, what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm now going to scan a potential system that I think uh, is interest to me and I want to attack that system. So what I'll do, I'll use Nmap, okay, and I'll use IP address of that system. So I already know the IP of that particular system. So it is 56.1. Sorry. Okay. 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 So it is telling me that the host seems down and I have to try using -pn. Okay. Now, can anybody tell me what is -pn? If you're familiar with
Flag.
Linux or network mapper, yes.
The flag.
Sorry.
It's a flag.
Okay, yeah, correct. You're absolutely right. Uh, but what it actually do when you're using PN?
Give support number.
Gives the port number. Okay. Okay, let's see what happens. Okay, so now let's hyphen en. Okay, so it will take certain point in time to start actually. Okay, so I hope the fonts are visible to all of you, because sometimes it happens that the font size is small, so it becomes difficult to read what is on the screen. So are you all able to read what is on the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good
Yes,
enough.
sir.
Okay, good.
Yes, sir.
So, okay, let's now analyze what I did here. I scanned a particular IP that I thought was interesting because I was interested in particular target, and I've identified that the target's IP is this. Okay, so through Nmap, I try to scan that particular IP. So again, I'm at the first stage of scanning, and what I've identified is that there are ports and there are services which are open. And all of you are familiar with the concepts of ports. Ports are the logical entry gates inside your network or inside your computer system. So the first thing that helps me gain access to the system is that I can see that there are port number 135, 139, 445 are open. Okay. So what I'll do, if I don't know what is the significance of port 135 or 139, I can simply Google it. Okay. Uh, but since I've done this exercise earlier also, and I'm familiar with the some of the port numbers, so I'll save you some time, and I'll suggest you can go if you are interested in exploiting this system. I'll recommend that you go for port number 139 and 445. Okay. Now, why I'm telling you for 139 and 445, because these two ports, first of all, they both are open. Okay, so that's beneficial for us. Second thing is that these two ports perform file transfer, and it can be used for actually SMB protocol. Okay, so generally 139 and 445 are used for delivery of SMB protocol. So what is SMB? Server message block. So basically it will transfer local server data from one system to another. So if you want to transfer a file from, let's say, your computer to another computer, or you want to print something from your computer, so you can transfer your data from your computer to the printer buffer, you can use 139 and 445 to perform that particular task. And by default, and it is in Windows 10, it is in Windows 11, and it was there in Windows 8 and 7 also. By default, this service always remains on in your operating system. Okay, so I know this, but let's say if you don't know, right, if you don't know what is 139, so you can always Google it, and based upon the knowledge that you gain, because see, there are logically 65,000 or more than 65,000 ports. So obviously you won't be able to know the working of each and every port. Most of the ports are always closed. Okay, but if you start scanning through Nmap, you will narrow down the list of ports, and you can then identify what each particular port does. But this knowledge comes with the experience. So as you will do this exercise again and again, you'll gain the knowledge. So there is no trick here. Just you have to perform the task again and again. Okay. So now next thing what I need to do is perform a particular task of knowing the services. Okay. So let's wait for services. Now I want to know some more detail about this particular system. So I'm waiting for the output. So let's wait and let's see what we are getting. Okay. So now it will tell me port, state, and service that I already knew, but it also tells me the version of that particular service. Okay, so I'm using RPC version and I'm here using NetBIOS SSN version. And why knowing versions is important? Because if you know the cybersecurity field, you will know that there are particular vulnerable points found out each and every day. So, and vulnerable points or weak points, as I call it, are not only found in a particular type of operating system, but it also depends on the version of operating system. And let me just give you the example of version through forensics field. So we are all familiar with the concept of digital forensics, or at least we have some idea that we can do digital forensics on digital device to know the, or to at least collect the digital evidences. So there was a time till 2020, 2017, that you can actually use certain softwares, and by connecting your mobile phones through those softwares, even though your mobile phones was supposed to be logged by password or by pattern, uh, the softwares could easily break those passwords or patterns and would gain access to your mobile phone and can completely collect entire data of your mobile phone, including your contacts, your call logs, your videos, whatever stored in your mobile phone, or even if you have deleted, those videos can be also connected, photos, everything, your WhatsApp chat, anything that you want to collect, right? But as I told you, this is a never ending game. People started realizing that the secure, this part of, and I'm talking about especially Android smartphones. Obviously, iOS also has its own problem. You might have all heard of Pegasus. So in Pegasus, there was a vulnerability, and actually you just have to give a missed call, and just by giving a missed call, you could actually insert Pegasus software into your target's mobile phone. And in Android, as I'm telling you, there were softwares which were available. Obviously, I won't be telling you the name of softwares, but those softwares are still available. But those softwares are of no use, because after 2017, the security of mobile phone has become so much big issue. So now those same softwares uh, will not be able to break your phone, right? Because the later version of Android has become more secure. So I'm giving you this example just to give you context of version, right? So versions of software has its own pluses and minuses. Why it is always recommended that you use the latest version of softwares? Because if you're using the older version of softwares, there are a lot of possibilities that older version software has a lot of problems, lot of weak points. And if you're using the old legacy software, then those weak points are still open, and any person who knows what kind of system or version you are using can actually utilize that particular information and attack you. Okay, so this is about version. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is sudo ms Kali. So let's wait. It should start. So actually, I'm trying to start Kali. Let's see what is the issue.
Sir, if version is so much important, so then why aren't we hiding कि भाई ये पर्टिकुलर वर्जन को हम हाइड क्यों नहीं कर सकते? मतलब उसकी डिटेल्स बाहर लाना थोड़ा ही जरूरी है.
See, if we go by the same logic, my friend, so why our IP is required to be public? Because most of the attacks are happening because you have exposed IP, correct? You use VPN, you use proxies, in order to hide your IP, but it's still available, right? So there are certain informations that you need to authenticate yourself also. If I hide some information, then it is also possible that I'm using a rogue hardware. Okay, but if I'm giving you the exact details of my hardware, it means that that hardware is known in the industry and that hardware can be identified anywhere in the world. But if I'm hiding the information about that particular hardware, what I'm doing actually, I'm not telling customer that what you're using. Okay, so it becomes very difficult to trust that particular person if you're hiding the information of that particular hardware, right? For example, if you're using a mobile phone, if I don't tell you which version you're using, okay, and if you are a security person, then it becomes very difficult for you to trust your mobile phone, is it not?
Okay.
Right, so it's about see, there are always pluses and minuses in everything, right? So you have to take what you have, okay, and you have to measure your pros and cons. So if you think that by giving this information, if you have more benefit, then obviously you will opt for that, and it still stands, right? It is still relevant that we have that information, right, rather than not having that information. So it becomes important, from my point of view at least, right? And obviously other people agree because it is still available. Okay, so should I continue?
Yeah, sure, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, not an issue. And I just a small request from my side. Obviously, we'll have a Q&A session after the demonstration. So just rather have your questions with you. Once I have all the demonstrations of Metasploit and then after Bobsuit, you can definitely ask me questions. But just because if I stop, then it becomes very difficult for me to continue. So just have your questions with you, guys, and I'll definitely take your questions later on in the session. Okay. So what I did here is I opened a tool called Metasploit. Okay, so you can directly open it. Okay, Metasploit, directly open it. You just have to use the command call sudo. You have to obviously switch to root user, so that's why sudo is used. Then msf console, and by using this command, it actually opens Metasploit. So it tells you how many exploits this particular version of Metasploit has, uh, how many port it can exploit, how many auxiliary services that it can exploit, right? And evasion attacks and all that. Okay, so we are particularly interested in knowing exploits, payloads, host, and auxiliaries, because exploits, as I told you, are a particular way of identifying what are the weak points. Payloads will be the actual code, right? So we don't have to write actually any code or script, because uh, if you are not familiar with the weak point, it becomes very difficult for you to create. Or at least if you are, even though if you are familiar with the weak point, right, it becomes, or it takes time, at least in my point of view, to create a code and to uh, create a payload and supply that payload to the target. So here is a tool, Metasploit, which provides you with the inbuilt exploits, inbuilt payload. Okay, and it gives you a lot of data regarding attack, and it will eventually provide you whatever you need for your attack, and I'll show you how. So now we have your Metasploit console. So as I was telling you that we had this information, right? So if you see, we had the information that I was interested in. So I was interested in 139 and 45 port. And as I've observed that 139 and 445 is related to SMB, or server message block protocol. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, sorry. Okay. So what I did actually, I used a keyword, just a second. So what I did here is I used the keyword SMB because I knew that port number 139 and 445 here, these two ports are related to SMB. Okay, and I know that these two ports does operate SMB services. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, because I have that knowledge now, okay, because first what I did is I tried to identify what were the weak points, and I got to know that 139 and 445 is available. So now I'll identify what kind of services are run on or run through that particular ports. So once I know that services, now I'll try to understand what kind of exploits or what kind of vulnerable or weak points I can see for that particular service or for that particular protocol. So I'm going to use command search SMB because I'm eager to learn about SMB and what kind of modules in SMB. Okay, so as you can see, there are a lot many options here that I can look for. So all this data that you're seeing in front of you is nothing but exploits that have been identified using SMB. Okay, so this goes down. This has lot many longer list, and what I want to do is actually I'm going to try to use it in a or try to view it in a particular sense. So I'll use grep command. I hope all of you are familiar with the Linux because uh, if you are interested in cybersecurity, if you're interested in network security or pen testing rather, uh, it is always good to have a knowledge about Linux because that is one of the base for building your career on any of these things. Okay, so okay, so I used grep command, and out of existing lot of uh, list, I just focused on particular. So by using grep command, I'm focusing on a particular grep vulnerable points. So now I can identify few things here. So okay, I got okay. So you can use any one of these vulnerable or weak point and try to use it for attacking a system. Okay, now for me I have identified this particular point because for me, because I have done some my own background understanding, because if I do all the background checking here, it will take around 2-3 hours to explain everything. So for the lack of timing, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to tell you that this particular exploit or this particular weak point can be easily utilized for performing a attack. Okay, now this attack, this using this vulnerable or weakness, vulnerable point or a weakness was very easy till Windows 8. After security update from Windows 10 onwards, this vulnerable point still exists, but the firewall has also upgraded, right? So sometimes this particular vulnerable attack that you are going to do, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Okay, but even though we'll try, let's see what happens. Okay, okay. So now what I did, I utilized this particular weak point. So now I want to ask Metasploit to show options regarding this particular weak point. particular weak point. So now I've identified the weak point that I'm going to exploit. Within that list of weak points, I've identified a particular weak point. And now through that weak point, I'm going to identify exploits and payloads that I can use to attack that particular weak point. Okay. So I've used this command use then auxiliary scanner smb underscore nsp17 underscore 010. By doing this, we'll get inside this particular weak point. So once we get inside that particular weak point, now we have to use command called show options. Okay. Now, once I press show options, it has list of options in front of me. Okay, that I can utilize. So I'll tell you what we need to do. Again, if you because of lack of time, I'm not going to explore each and every option. You can do it on your own. But from my experience point of view, what I'll tell you is you can utilize our host. Okay, this particular exploit, and what you need to do is you need to define the host IP here. Okay, so let's do one thing. You can, sorry. Six. 56.1. So this is the IP that I was interested in. Okay. So now entered. Okay. So from this point onwards, we can find exploits related to it, or what we can do rather, instead of going for exploits, uh, I would suggest you identify how you can use our host to gain access to your system. Now, this is the point where I'll stop in this particular example, because after then it becomes a point of attacking the system, because now I have to just identify a few commands and write here, and it will gain access to the system. So my point here is to not to lead you guys to do harmful things, but I want you guys to at least understand, because see, if you want to be a good security researcher, you need to understand the mind of attacker. You need to understand how attackers attack the system, and that's what I wanted to show. So I'm going to stop right here because okay, let me reshare it. Okay. So all right. Okay. काम करते हैं. Let's just first switch to the desktop. Okay. So I've already pre-written this code. So what I'm going to do is just explain what we are going to do here. So MSF Venom is the tool that we will use in order to create a payload within our system. Okay, and I'll show you that payload also. So if you don't want to use payload which is already existing, so this particular command will let you create your own exploit based upon the kind of attack that you want to do. So I've selected reverse TCP attack. Okay, because reverse TCP actually will not only give me access to the network, but because I have reverse TCP method, because in reverse TCP method, what you do is you actually gain access to the active system. So if your system is right now running, I can gain access to your live system and actually modify things. I can actually implement certain things that you don't realize, or I can steal data from your system. So this reverse TCP attack uh, is quite useful, and it can be used against Windows based operating system. Although Linux, some version of Linux has patch for this particular attack, but I would still say the older, if you're using the older version of Linux, and if you're using particularly if you're using Windows 7 or Windows 8, you are very exposed to this particular attack. So reverse TCP is a very known attack, and actually you can utilize this attack not only on, as I told you, on Windows system, but because right now my host system is Windows, so that's why I'm using the word Windows here. But if you are planning to create a payload for Linux or for any other operating system, you can definitely do it. Okay, so this is about what kind of attack that I want to perform. From this part of this particular command, I need to know the host IP. So obviously, as you know that host IP is the IP of your particular computer. So if config, using in config, you can get to know the IP of your system. Okay, and here this part port, you don't have to necessarily write this 4-digit port number, that is, I've written 4444. You can use any port number you want, because I've not written any port which is before 3-digit, because most of those ports are having some kind of functionality. Okay, so if I choose any port after 3000 or 4000, the chances are most of these ports are not utilized at all. As I told you, there are more than 65,000 logical ports in a computer system, right? So it's not necessary that each and every port is utilized. As I told you, most of them are closed, or most of them are not utilized at all. So if you start giving any particular port, because if you want to create a particular payload, you have to also make sure that you tell what kind of port it is going to be used to deliver that payload. So you have to identify the port. So here I have just randomly identified this port number. You can give any port number that you want. Okay, and finally I've used exe, and the reason why I've used file extension exe, because in Windows the executable files have extension exe. Okay, so this first and this last point of this particular command is interconnected. If you are using Windows operating system, obviously you are going to write exe. Okay, if you are using Linux, you can write tar, you can write a different operating system, have different extension, but you have to make sure that you use the file extension, okay, that has executable properties in that particular operating system. Okay, and finally just give any file name that you want. Okay, and I've now pressed enter. Let's see what happens. Okay, so it tells me that a payload of 354 bytes has been created, and the final size of that particular payload is this much. Okay, so if you see here, there is a payload created on my desktop, and that is called hack.exe. Okay, so I can clearly see that sorry, just a minute. I can clearly see that a payload has been created because I'm on desktop. That is my current directory. So it is created in the current directory, and that is why I've chosen desktop. Now, for the next part, I want to now transfer my payload, that is from host system to the target system. Okay, so for that, what I need to do, I need to make sure that it is stored inside a local active database. Okay, and by accessing that database, I will be able to extract my payload from my machine to any other machine. So for that, okay, sorry, so let me just write it. I thought it is okay, let me just write. Okay, it's here. So I'm using Kali Linux, and I think if you're using Kali Linux or Paratos or any modern version of Linux operating system, especially Debian based, most of them have pre-built Python, or if not, you can just, it's very easy to download Python, okay, from repository. So what I'm basically doing here is starting a local server, okay, through Python. Now there are two ways of starting local server. You can use Python. I prefer that because it becomes easier for me. Although there are other means. There is Postgres SQL. Okay, so that's Postgres SQL is nothing but a relational database, but that is open source relational database, and that open source relational database also can be utilized to host payload in that particular server through that server, and through that Postgres SQL server we can actually access payload. But here I am used Python. You can use Python. You can use Postgres SQL. It's your choice. Okay. Okay. So now this is showing me that it's on. Okay. But what I'm going to show you now will not contain the active attack modulation or simulation, but I'll tell you what things happen. Okay, because I don't want to show you any active way of doing harmful things, but at least to guide you that what you can do. Okay, so let me just do things. So till now what we have done, so let me repeat things. So what we are planning to do here is to have a specialized creation of a payload. Okay, and in order to create a specialized version of payload, we can use Metasploit again, and we can use Venom framework of Metasploit, and through Venom we can create certain payloads. Now in order to do that, you need to understand few things. You need to understand what kind of system that you want to target. So if you are knowing that it is a Linux system, then you have to mention Linux. If you're using Windows, then you have to mention Windows. So once you know what kind of system you're going to target, then you need to understand what kind of attack that you want to perform. Now I've chosen reverse TCP because, as I told you, that it is well known, and a lot of operating system, Linux based or Windows based, are vulnerable to reverse TCP attack, and it is one of the most dangerous attack, I would say, but it's relatively easy to stop now through antivirus softwares. But there was a time then when reverse TCP was considered one of the top attacks that you can do against a system. So if you know the system, if you know the IP of the system, sorry, if you know the system and if you know the attack that you want to perform, so you can write this particular line of code, and it will uh, uh, create a payload. Once you create a payload, what will happen that you need to host that payload into some server. Okay, so this is actually now by starting this server. Now what I did is I've created my desktop as a little server that I can access through my network. So let's say if my host and my VM, that is my VM machine, are on a same network, then I can actually utilize file, because I have created a local server. So within the local server, any computer which is attached to that particular local server can actually access that particular file. That's why I've created the server, in order to access that file. So I'll show you what next you have to do. So next, what, just a minute, because the next part would require me to switch from my VMware to my Windows system, because Windows system would be my target system. So just a second, guys.
Wait, wait. No, no, no.
Somebody's mic is on, so I would request if you can just switch off your mic. Okay, thank you. So again, let's see what IP host IP is. So host IP is 192.168.56.138, and we have used 8000 as the access port for this particular server. So if I want to now access this particular payload that I've created, what I need to do is I need to understand the host IP, because host IP is basically the local server address for me. So let me now do one thing. Okay, so what basically that I would do here is I will uh, write IP address and colon whatever the host or whatever the server's address is. So once I do that, um, what will happen eventually here? It is not permissible here because I have not shut down my firewall. And sometimes, as I told you, that certain attacks are blocked, certain times it is not blocked. But my antivirus and my Windows Defender will not let me access this particular server. But the main reason that I wanted to show you this is that reverse TCP attack is pretty common and can still be used against Windows 10 system, Windows 11. But although in Windows 11 they have upgraded their security patches and it becomes a bit difficult, but this attack again I showed you because this is still one of the most common and one of the most dangerous attacks out there. Uh, because if you have a reverse TCP connection from host to your target machine, then fundamentally you have control all the controls of the entire target machine. Okay, so once you uh, perform that particular task that I told you through browser, if you access that particular server, local server, so it will eventually show you the data packet link. So once you click on that data packet now is delivered to your target machine. Okay, once it is delivered to your target machine, what you have to do is just uh, two lines of code, and that's it. You have to write a particular, you have to set actually what you have to do, you have to set that particular exploits handle. And after setting the handle, what you need to do is just write the last command, that is exploit. So but just writing two lines of command, you will gain access to the system. But as I told you that I don't want to show you actual attack happening, but just to lead you to the um, path in which you can expose yourself and you can learn on your own. But at least it will give you idea that how to carry out. So using Metasploit, what we did is we have tried to understand how we can utilize the exploit which is within the framework, and how we can utilize or create framework, create a payload which is outside the framework but still can be used against any other machines. So both have different methods of doing it. First, in Metasploit, what we did is we explored the weaknesses, and using weaknesses we identified the versions, and knowing the version and the TCP port, utilizing the knowledge that you have, we have identified a particular service, and then we try to identify the exploits for that particular service. So that's what we did using Metasploit. So now I want to again, let me share my screen of Kali Linux. Now I want to expose you guys to another tool that I personally like very much, and that is Burpsuit. So if you have Kali Linux, Burpsuits are part of Kali Linux. You just search it, and we'll get access to it. So let's see what we need to do. So burp suit are collections. I would say it's a collection of attacks. It's a collection. It's a framework under which you can perform attacks. You can find vulnerable in web applications. So from network point of view, Metasploit is very important. But from web application point of view, again, burp suit I think is one of the best tools out there to perform analysis of web-based applications. So I chose this particular tool for the reasons that
आज अच्छा मैं छुट्टी थी तो
uh,
मैं छुट्टी कहाँ कौन सी
somebody's mic is on, so I would request if you just turn off your mic.
छुट्टी कुछ भी नहीं है चालू ही है हाइब्रिड भी
Uh,
कर सकते हैं सर हाँ ऑनलाइन क्लास अटेंड कर लो ना एक्सपर्ट तब ऑनलाइन कर लो अरे लोग तो ऑनलाइन ही कर लेते ऑफलाइन भी बोलते हैं
okay,
हमारे तो ऑनलाइन ही है
so I know that screen that is on your that is visible right now has font size very small. So let me just increase the font size.
आइस टी नहीं पीनी आइस टी के बाद ही
Okay. Can I request any volunteer to make sure that the mic is turned off, because it becomes difficult for me to explain while there is a noise coming in from one of the students.
Actually, sir, we don't have the host controls. I guess faculty would be able to do that.
Okay, so would you request Shivangi ma'am to intervene here?
टेबल ले लेना
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Okay, okay, okay. I think we have solved the problem. So again, let's go back to the topic at hand. Okay, so does this font size work, or should I increase the font size?
It would be good if you would be able to increase it, sir.
Okay, let me try 18 now.
Yes, sir, it's readable.
Okay, okay, good enough, good enough. So by the way, if you want to do it yourself, what you need to do is, when you start it, you go to user options, display, and within this subsection display, you can select the font sizes. Anyways, now let me explain about this tool. So burp suit has been there for quite some time. It is pre-installed tool when you are using Kali, and Kali has Metasploit and burp suit both as pre-installed tools package. So reason for me to select this particular software and not any other is again because we are focused on network security. So Metasploit covers network security, but within network security there is a concept of understanding that we need to keep in mind is the web security or web application security. And for that, this particular tool is, I consider, as one of the best tool available. Now this tool again comes into the two forms. So the form that we are using right now, or the version that we are using right now, is a community edition or community version. Now this community edition is free, is open source. If you don't have it on your Linux system, you can download it. You can also download it for your Windows operating system. By the way, it's not only exclusive for the uh, uh, Linux based system. You can download it on your Windows system as well. There is a pro edition of burp suit also. So if you can see here, you can see clearly that this all part is not accessible because it is provided only to the pro versions. Okay, but I think for the basic analysis and basic understanding of web security or web application security, the community edition is more than good enough to understand everything, right? So there are a few interesting, because see, if you look at the entire dashboard, there are a lot many things going on over here, right? So it becomes very overwhelming if you open the burp suite for the first time, or if you see the burp suite for the first time, right? So there are a few things here that are important. So obviously I won't be able to explain the entire burp suite within 10-15 minutes, because I also want to give you guys some time for Q&A. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain few fundamental points that you can take away, and then you can start exploring burp suite on your own. Okay, so if you go to proxy, okay, so if you see here, it has its own browser, and there is a button here called intercept. So intercept is off, intercept is on. And what does this particular setup do is, if you use this particular inbuilt browser of burp suite, and if you open any website or any web-based application through this browser, then any communication that happens between your client system and to the server, the entire communication can be intercepted. Okay, that's why we have intercept on, intercept off option. And if you can intercept the network communication, as I told you, that passive attack and active attack, right? So this is the active attack done very easily and this particular software is very user friendly as well, right? So if you know fundamental ways of working of web application, you can easily utilize this application. So what I'm going to demonstrate first here is that how does using this particular tool. So let me open the browser, which is by the way provided within this version and all the versions. So this browser, okay, I've opened this browser. Now what I'm doing intercept on. So anything that I'm going to now access using this browser will be intercepted. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to open YouTube. Okay, so let me just open YouTube through. So as you can see, immediately as I open YouTube, it transferred me to burp suite page again. Why? Because burp suite immediately read that there has been some request which has been sent from your system to a particular server, and that has been intercepted. And now what you can do, through your system, you can actually drop it. It means that it will not go to the server, or you can actually forward it. But if you can see now here, it is still waiting for my response. It has still not started. So whatever the response I will give here, based upon that response, the action will be performed. So what I do, if I say forward, okay, so there is another request, forward. So now I can, given request to all the, okay. So now as you can see, there are few details which have started coming in. Okay, so as you can see, the logo has started coming in. So again, if I give forward here, okay, so you can see thumbnails has started coming in, and now you can see the YouTube is accessible. Okay, so the first thing that you will notice here, that everything that has been going from your system to the server has been intercepted, and you can actually read here whatever the messages you are going. Okay, and don't worry, your entire history, that is communication between your local system to the Google server, because basically YouTube is what it's a video file system that has been accessed, and that has been the video stream system that has been stored in the Google data servers. So basically it's a communication between you and, sorry, it is a communication between you and so your system and server, Google servers, and the entire communication you can watch it here, okay, in HTTP proxy. So again, going back to the intercept. So this particular thing tells us that entire communication has been intercepted, or the links or the data that that you were sending from your system to um, Google server has been intercepted. Now, one interesting thing that I want you guys to observe here, if you look at here, it is showing us that it is not secure. But if you open your YouTube in your normal browser, you will never find this particular message. Okay, you will always find a digital certificate, okay, attached to your YouTube, because YouTube is one of the most famous websites in the world. A lot of people use it. There have been digital certificate assigned to it. So primarily you should not be getting this message. But because we are using burp suite, and because it intervenes in each and every message passing between client and server, it actually, because of this interception, it has to delete SSL layer. So because we are removing the SSL layer from the entire communication happening between your website, your system to Google server, uh, the not secure message is coming because there is no SSL certificate. Okay, but ideally, if you use any normal browser, you will never see this not secure message. But because you are using burp suite, that message will be there. Okay, so this is the primary example in which how you can actually read communication between you system and the server system. Okay, so one more demonstration that I want to give you before giving you guys an opportunity to ask questions. So there is another famous uh, dashboard subsection that I like, and that is target. Now target, as you can see here, will give you the entire detail, what you want to target, sorry, what you want to see between client side and response side. So target will give you the source and the data exchange happening between source and destination. So what you have sent by using this particular link, you can see that this particular link has sent this particular request, and in response to that particular request, the server has sent this particular message. So by knowing the difference between sorry, by knowing the different links that has been transferring from one system to another, or server, client to server, you can actually read request and response. And Bubsuit is so easy to use that you can just click on any link and it will give you the idea. It will give you idea about what request has been sent and what response has been received. So okay, other than that, we can also define scope. Okay, what is defining scope? So instead of not going here and there, if I want to focus on particular website, what I can do by adding a particular website, for example, if I add YouTube here, youtube.com. Okay, so what will happen now is that each and every website that I open will not be captured. Only and only YouTube will be captured because I have focused my target scope. Okay, so what I did is that I have eventually narrowed down my scope to a particular website, and regardless of what other websites that I open in my browser, I will be only intercepting this particular website. So if you want to use your Burpsuit browser for other purposes other than interception, then you can use it. Okay, and you can easily add anything and remove anything. Just remove it, and again it becomes so it's very easy to use. Now scope has been defined. Okay, now what I'm going to show you is a particular tool that is part of this Bubsuit package, and that is intruder. Okay, intruder basically has a list of attacks that you can do. Okay, so I'll show you later on, but basically it has list of attacks that you can do. For example, sniper attack, pitchfork attack, cluster bomb attack, and everything. Okay, and first of all, you need to identify a particular uh, uh, target. So what I'm going to do here is to, okay, time is running, so I'll just show you a particular website that you can use for your practice. So proxy intercept of browser. Basically, this is happening because of the firewall or the network that I have, because I'm in my university's campus and it has this mechanism that blocks every time it finds. So, okay, so uh, we are using this particular uh, website. Okay, so acunetics.test is a practice page that most of us use in order to see what happens, because see, you ideally it is not permissible, and legally it is not done to intercept any known website, right? So we have simulated environments in which you can actually understand and read, or at least try to perform all these things. So what we do here is go to this test page called Acunetics, and within Acunetics you have to see the test PHP page. So once you reach test PHP page, let's say I go for this login page. So let's say there are some login information that I need. Okay, so I'm entering my login detail. You can enter any detail that you want, but I'll show you certain things. That's why I wanted to give you guys an idea. So write any password 1 2 3 4 5 6. Okay, login. Okay, so what I did is I started my intercept here, and as soon as I logged in my detail, it immediately told me that see, this is okay. Okay, so if you can just focus on this part, it told me what username I used and what password I used, right? So I use username test and I use password 23456. So by using this particular browser and by using this particular tool, I'm able to identify which particular username and password I have used, right? So using this particular tool, and you can not only read all this thing information, but you can also perform a lot of attacks and simulate that attacks on your web application. And by doing that, what you can actually do is you can actually now identify that what kinds of problems that your system might be facing, or attacks your system might be facing, and because of that knowledge you can actually defend your system better. So what I'll do, I'll just stop my presentation here right now. So I have demonstrated a few things in Bubsuit. I hope that you'll explore more. And Metasploit, as I told you, already explained, we have seen two things. We have seen inbuilt payloads, and we have also created a payload, and we understood how you can deliver that payload. Okay, so I'll stop it right here, and I'll switch over to the moderators. And so let me know if there are any questions. Is there anyone who's leading this talk right now, or is there anyone from Changa who's handling the entire session?
Students, you may ask the question if you have any.
Yeah. Okay, I can see a few hands. So, Dhruval.
Yes, sir. So, like, my question was that whenever, like, you said about port numbers and
Hmm,
the versions related to them and stuff,
hmm.
but like, what if we are given a scenario wherein, like, there's a, you can say, kind of a moving object, and you have to, and like, there's a communication going on side by side, like both sides.
Mhm.
So, like, how do you intercept those communications?
So that's what basically we did in the bub suit, doesn't it? So basically what we are doing, see, anytime there is a data which is transferring from your system to another system, it will use a port, correct? Because without port, ports are logically gates. Okay,
Yeah.
if you don't have gate, you won't be able to go outside. So without ports, you won't be able to deliver data outside, right? So
Hmm.
basically what bub suit was doing is basically doing that, capturing the live data, right? That's why we were able to capture the login ID and the password using intruder tool, correct?
Hmm. So, like, and how do you like countermeasure those things?
Yeah,
So,
very good question. So what you need to do, because see, it removes the SSL layer. So what you need to do whenever you get sensitive information, add an extra bit of layer of nowadays a lot of social media sites and other Google, Gmail, by the way, and all these big companies do is they encrypt the password at the client side only. Okay, so if anything goes again outside from the client side itself, the data is encrypted. Okay, so you won't be able to read it.
so you mean to say that whenever I'm clicking the submit button, the first thing it is doing that it is encrypting the message and then it is like sending it.
Not first thing, not first thing. First thing, it has to first uh, read your data, right? So reading
Huh,
the data, that happens the first thing. Okay,
huh.
now the interesting point of this question is that, see, even if I tell you that encryption happens, right? But nowadays there are a lot of attacks which happens, which are known as man in the middle attack, right? So earlier what used to happen, that burp suit is a typical example of that. That if I'm transferring data from point A to point B, and if I get the data, I can read it, and that's it, right? So that's why we had a cryptography then. So encryption happens. But here now, the concept of end-to-end encryption, that's what I'm trying to come here on that particular point. So when I'm transferring a data, okay, let's say if I'm opening my Gmail, let's take an example, practical example. If I'm opening a Gmail and I write my username and ID, and by the way, there are a lot of people who do a bad thing, in my opinion, is this: they store their username and ID in their browser, correct? So if I have access to your system, I can easily steal your passwords from your browser and I can get access to your Gmail. But if I'm performing man in the middle attack, and if I'm just trying to get access to your username and passwords, then it becomes very difficult for me, because it data is encrypted. But if I am in your system, then it's not difficult for me.
તારે ફરવું નહીં પણ 2 મિનિટ.
Yeah, so any other questions, guys? Okay, so think uh, 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 we have covered.
Sir, can we like continuously change the port numbers in order to countermeasure it? Like,
Yes, but that's too unpredictable and that's too dangerous. And the risk attached to that, my friend, is that if you can't see, if you continuously change the port of data communication, so what you're doing is basically changing the communication channel each time, and it is unpredictable move. So basically, it becomes very easier for any person who is defending the network, because as a person you know which next port you are going to expose your channel to, but as an attacker it becomes very difficult for me. But nowadays lot of people have implemented automated IDS systems or automated firewalls, and if you continuously change your port, the automatic assumption, as I told you about behavioral analysis, right? So behavioral analysis is nowadays part of your firewall and your IDS IPS systems. So by changing continuous ports, what you are telling your IDS and IPS system is that there is some issue with your channel, and it will put your IP into a block state because you are continuously moving from one point to another point. Correct. So that behavior is not typical behavior. And another reason for not doing it, because every time you open a new port, you have to establish a session. Okay. If you don't have session existing between two communication channels, then it doesn't happen. And every time you have to establish a channel, you are actually wasting certain amount of time. If you have fast access to the network and everything, then it becomes easier. But every time when you have to, that data transfer needs to take place between your system and to server, you have to make sure that a session is existing. Okay. So it takes time every time when you change the port. Okay.
Okay, any other questions, students? Fine. Okay, sir. Thank you so much for delivering such a fruitful and valuable knowledge with our students of Charuset. And we are hoping to have more such sessions from your side in future.
It was a very good experience, and thank you for having me, Madam Sivanki.
Okay. So I have shared the feedback form in the chat box, and you all have to fill this feedback form. And after that, you can leave the session.
Okay. Should I leave the session, ma'am? If there is no.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you every one of you for listening and sitting patiently and listening to me. Okay. So have a
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for delivering such a fruitful session.
okay, all of you. Okay.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, Parth.
We cannot access that chat box. Can you send the link over mail?
You cannot access, but I have already started receiving the responses. So the form is working.
It is showing that I have not joined the team. So you can also tell them
Okay,
to.
okay. I will share the form in the email.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. So how was the session?
Pretty good.
Okay. What about others? Have you attended it or was just simply joined the session and muted yourselves? Satvik, Te, Hirva, are you present?
No, ma'am, the session was pretty good.
Okay.
We attended it.
Okay. Fine. Okay, so you can leave the session now and I will share the form in the mail so you can fill up that. And as I have mentioned in the classroom that you will have the quiz based on this session. So in your lab sessions, you will get the link for the quiz and then you have to give that quiz. Okay, so you can obviously see the recorded video also if you want to, and you will have the 5 marks of quiz from this session. Okay, fine. So thanks for attending. Have a good day.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.